Hi and welcome everybody. So today kicks off 9 months of structured programming to support applicants for the variety of awards, internal and external, that recognize outstanding teaching. And I'm going to pop a link in the chat in case you're interested in that and want to attend anything else we have planned over the next few months. I'm grateful to Eric Armstrong and Bridget Carthree for volunteering their time to share with us their reflections on winning teaching and learning awards. And I'm also thankful to Franz Newland for stepping in for his C4 partner, Danielle Robinson, who's unable to join us as she rests and recovers from COVID, which is a not so nice reminder that we are not living in a post-COVID world. So we are still living with that and trying to teach and learn in that space. And don't worry, Eric, Bridget, and Franz are going to have an opportunity to properly introduce themselves shortly. I'd like to share my screen for just a moment. While I just share a land acknowledgement page that I put together. I'm going to copy into the chat York's land acknowledgement as well. We are hosting this online, and you may be watching this recording from anywhere. So I can't really do a land acknowledgement for where we are. I can place the land acknowledgement for York, but I do want to focus on the photo that I have placed on the right. You'll see it is a nice green garden on a sunny day, which is the very opposite of this February wet and snowy day. So partially, I just want to remind myself that green grass is coming. But it's also a picture of my back garden. And this area was home to the Alderville First Nations for a long time. They are now more north of where I am in their own reservation. And what I want to focus on is the planting of 2 trees at the front. I moved into this home in 2021, and I'm not a big manicured lawn guy. I don't think that Scott really should have a place. So I'm in the process of trying to rewild that space as much as I can. I want to bring that so that it is good for the environment, it's good for the animals and the insects and everything that makes a home here, rather than just something that looks pretty. So it's a slow process, but you'll see, if you can see, there's more clover growing at the front. So we have bunny rabbits that like to be there and nest there and eat there, rather than just the green grass that just doesn't do much other than beautify. So I encourage you, if you are in another space, put your own land acknowledgement in the chat, or if you're watching online, maybe pause the video right now and take a moment to reflect. Before we delve in, I would like to offer a further reflection on the makeup of this panel, especially following a land acknowledgement and as we meet on the final day of Black History Month. An educational developer with a teaching commons and part of teaching and learning communities across the country, I have the distinct pleasure, and I mean pleasure, of seeing the innovative work that goes on in our classrooms. Yet many of those faculty members do not see themselves as having done enough to warrant applying for an award. Or they may not have the time to create an application or a dossier, or they may not have somebody championing them as a nominator. And this is particularly true for faculty from systemically marginalized groups. I can, however, only state that anecdotally and from extrapolating from research on other kinds of awards and fellowships, as there are no, to my knowledge, detailed reports from any of the major external awards in teaching and learning that shares and interrogates just who is getting these awards. So if you don't see yourself as an award winner, let's change what award winners look like. If you don't have time to apply, reach out and we'll make a support plan that works for you, or come to the ongoing programming, because we built it to be slow and purposeful, even if you don't have a lot of time. And if you're in a position to nominate, do so. Encourage your colleagues. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the AVP Teaching and Learning, Will Gage, to just say a few words.
Thank you, Matthew. And I will try to keep it to just a few words. It's not always my strong suit in keeping it short, but I'll do my best. Welcome, everyone. Thank you to Matthew and Geneviève and everyone in the Teaching Commons for coordinating this event and basically coordinating and instituting a longer range plan to build and enhance the number of internal and external award winners. Before I go further, I'd really like to thank Eric, Franz, and Bridget for joining us today. We are endeavoring as a university to do more to recognize excellent teaching at York. It's I'll use the words that Matthew just used. It's a slow and purposeful process. Excellence in teaching emerges in one's practice over years. Some of us come to teaching almost like a performance, and that can be great. Others are not so inclined, and that in no way limits them from excellence in their teaching as well. There's so many different ways to approach teaching, and the evidence is really starting to bear out in the scholarship of teaching and learning literature and other places, other bodies of knowledge, that there are so many different ways that are effective at the end of the day, that are effective for learning for our students. We're in a time of really rapid change within the academy. Clearly, the pandemic, which has, as Matthew mentioned earlier to us, I think before we started recording, that several people weren't able to attend today, including one of our scheduled presenters, because they're ill. They're ill at home and resting, one with COVID that we know of, probably others as well, but the flu and other illnesses are on the rise at the moment too. So we're doing this online, which is fantastic, and a lot of our teaching has been virtual in this format, and so many of us have adapted to this change. We need to continue adapting. We need to continue expanding how we teach. We need to continue practicing our skills in those ways. And as a university, we need to do more to recognize those who are really leading the way. And so a few years ago, Geneviève and I started chatting about how do we structure a system that does recognize excellence in teaching and is purposeful about it. So, because as we said a minute ago, it doesn't happen quickly. It's a slow and purposeful process. How can we bring people to the table? How can we encourage our perhaps our more junior colleagues to really focus on this as an avenue for their career, a career pathway? How can we encourage people to see themselves as excellent teachers and excellent scholars, to the point that they're either willing to step forward themselves or allow their colleagues to nominate them? One of the best things we can do as a community is recognize the excellence in our colleagues and suggest to them, ask them if we can nominate them, if we can bring them forward to demonstrate their excellence as a university for our students. And that is how people's names come forward. And through the Teaching Commons, we've developed a robust system to help our colleagues to see themselves as excellent teachers, to recognize the excellence in what they're doing, and to put that on paper, if you will. It's never on paper anymore. It's put fingers to a keyboard, but we've developed the systems to help our colleagues do this. It's up to us now as a community to identify those who are doing excellent work and to bring their names forward. So I'd really like to thank those of you who are joining us to listen today and to ask questions in a little while. Really like to thank you for coming forward today. I expect that we're going to see your names coming forward sooner rather than later for various different award opportunities. And the idea being that if we start internally with internal awards that scaffold and ladder up, we create a strong dossier. We help you to create a strong dossier that we can present to the rest of the world, that goes external for the D2L awards, for the 3M awards, and there are a lot of others. So and I'm going to stop myself from talking because I could probably ramble about this kind of stuff all day long. Thank you so much for joining us today. Matthew, I'm going to turn it back to you with thanks for holding the microphone for us today. I'm not able to stay for long. I am double booked, so I do have to run, but thanks, many thanks to Geneviève for making the opportunity for me to come and say a few words too. So thanks, Matthew.
Thank you so much, Will. And speaking of Geneviève, I'd like to pass it to Geneviève, our Teaching Commons Director, to say a couple of remarks too before we jump into this wonderful panel.
Thank you, Matthew. I think what I want to say is that to me, and to all of us in the Teaching Commons and more broadly, I think in this room, I am and we are acutely aware that teaching is a multifaceted activity. It is, delivering a lecture, of course. It is creating a wonderful relationship with students. It is broader than that. Oftentimes it requires leadership at the departmental level and all sorts of other skills. It also requires dedication and a lot of trial and errors. However, how we talk about teaching is often focused on end results. Either we're talking about learning outcomes that were achieved or not, whether we talk about end of course evaluations. And when we open the little envelope, I remember back in the day, I received the actual physical evaluations with trepidation, and sometimes it sat on my desk for a couple of days before I gathered the courage to find out what students thought. And sometimes it is a teaching award received along the way. Those are all great, and they're all part of how we might want to frame teaching and teaching excellence. But what I want to say is that teaching excellence takes different shapes and forms, and it is often unseen. And so I'm really thankful for the work that Matthew is spearheading this year to really help emergent and confirmed excellent teachers that work in their corner without necessarily being seen and without having a chance to tell their story. And I think at the end of the day, what is the most compelling is the story. It might be the learning outcomes achieved. It might be the end of course evaluations that just are awesome. Or it might be the internal teaching award that one received. But really there's a story behind every teacher's journey. And I think that Matthew shares with me the idea that by revealing these stories, we are able to show how people are being excellent, or I don't really like the word excellent, but are being the best teachers that they can be, really. And so today is an example of that. We're going to hear from our panelists who will tell at least bits and parts of their stories and inspire us to try different things with our teaching and to fail sometimes and try again. So back to you, Matthew.
Thank you so much, Geneviève. So that brings us to our first question. And I would like to just take the opportunity for the first question to ask our panelists to introduce themselves. So we'll begin with Bridget, and then if we can go to Eric and then Friends, that would be wonderful.
Lovely to be here this afternoon. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Matthew and Geneviève, for this opportunity. My name is Bridget Cothry. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Dance in the School of Arts, Media, Performance, and Design.
Hi, everybody. I'm Eric Armstrong, and I am the chair of the Department of Theater and Performance. And I've been teaching at York since 2003. And I teach actors how to use their voices. And my area of research is in voice and speech pedagogy for the actor, especially around accent training. And you may have seen my work if you see the show The Expanse. I invented the belter accent that the people from outer space use. So that's me.
That's a great segue. I am Franz Newland. I am from space engineering, so in the Lausanne School of Engineering. And I'm also very, very inadequately filling my colleague's shoes, Danielle Robinson, also from Arts, Media, Performance and Design. So.
Perfect. Thank you all. So you may have received many awards, but for the next question, I'd love you to contemplate name one of the awards that you have received and what it meant to you when you first received it. And we'll start with Franz, then move to you, Eric, and then you, Bridget.
If you'll allow me, I'm actually going to talk about a couple of different ones because it sort of exposes the different types. I've had the fortune of being associated with a couple of different awards. The one that one of the ones that Danielle and I were lucky enough to be associated with was the Global Engineering Deans Council and Airbus Award for Diversity in Education. So this was an award for a project that we undertook, the cross-campus capstone classroom C4. And so there are awards out there that are associated with an activity or a project, not just individuals. And we were also lucky enough to be shortlisted for the Quirelli-Simmons Reimagine Education Awards as well. So we didn't win that, but we were shortlisted, which was a great opportunity to get exposure. So awards can be a tool for getting exposure for a project or an activity that you're doing. I've also been lucky enough to get the American Society of Engineering Education St. Lawrence Chapter Award as Engineering Educator of the Year for a couple of years ago. Which was a nomination by my deans. So again, to what Will was saying earlier on about being having champions who can support and nominate us, that's really important. So there are different types of awards out there, which is the thing I was going to say. That's me.
I received the School of Arts, Media, Performance and Design Senior Teaching Award in August. And it meant quite a lot to me. I'd been nominated by a colleague who was retiring in June, who had nominated me twice before. So third time is a charm. And it also coincided with my promotion to full professor. And so that was tied together in my package that I created for my promotion, served as some of the documentation that was useful in terms of putting the award forward. So yeah, it was meaningful for me. I was actually quite moved, a little bit surprised by how moved I was to receive that recognition.
So I've received 2 intra-university awards for my teaching. The first was in 2014, and it was the first Arts, Media and Performance Design e-learning award for a course that I created when I was part-time faculty. So I've been teaching at York since 2008, but only full-time since 2020. So in fact, the 2 awards that I've received were as a member of part-time faculty. So they were extremely meaningful. And when one thinks about being a sessional faculty member, there's a great deal of precarity and perhaps a sense of teaching in a little bit of a vacuum. One cannot, it's wonderful to be able to have the opportunity to teach a course or a series of courses with very little oversight, but then at the same time, you never get the feedback that you're craving from colleagues and peers, in addition to students. So that one was especially rewarding in 2014, and then in 2018, and that was, nominated by members of my department. full-time faculty nominated me for that award. And in 2018, I received the President's University-wide Teaching Award for part-time faculty. And that was a strange thing to receive, because I was nominated by students, by graduate students that I was supervising as a course director, and was also involved in their committees. And it was strange because of the timing. At that time, QP was on one of their many strikes, and I was sitting at home and got a phone call. So it seemed very, but so again, it just sort of was like, wow, what a wonderful thing. And in both cases, what they share in common is they were very motivating.
Thank you all so much. It's wonderful hearing the joy and enthusiasm in all your answers, that and that meaningfulness that comes with receiving these. Many of you have already touched on this, but I wonder if any of you have anything to add, that in hindsight, what do the awards mean to you now? Has it impacted your career in any way? Has it led to conversion, getting other awards, grants? If we could start with Eric this time and then move to Bridget and friends, that would be wonderful.
So every night I polish my plaque before I go to bed. To be honest with you, when I got the email, I was like, what award? I was like, oh, right, the award. We don't sit around thinking about our awards. The humility of the faculty member is really instilled, right? We're indoctrinated to kind of like, oh, I'm not worthy, I'm not worthy. But I really do believe in my unit, in my department. I really do believe that awards are good for the institution, that they raise our profile. And I kind of believe in them for my peers. Like, that's how I kind of got into it, because I was nominating other people for awards. And I've always seen that as part of my role, is to kind of keep my eye out for folks to nominate for awards. And not many of my peers actually think that way. And, I think I've nominated 4 colleagues for awards who've received the award. So it is just something I do. And I kind of imagined that people would then flip around and nominate me for award, but it wasn't until I actually asked someone to do that. Teaching is part of my self-definition. I came to this work to work in a university because I wanted to teach, not because I wanted to do research. This is in a studio art form where you study in the studio. My classes are very small. So teaching is who I am. Like, it's very much part of my identity. So I also want to be a role model for my colleagues. So which is part of why I'm here today, but that's how it's impacted me.
So in particular, the university-wide President's Teaching Award was, I believe, instrumental in being converted to full-time faculty in July 2020. I had attended a session a few years before about conversion. So it was something that I had was planning for and hoping that I would be lucky enough to win that lottery. And I attended an information session about the process of conversion. And the person who was facilitating that session talked about a sort of checklist of things that would help my application when it came time to apply, when that opening presented itself. And one of the considerations would be recognition of teaching, especially in light of teaching stream position. So, and also going from something that Eric just said, I always wanted to do both. I wanted to teach and I wanted to do research. And I have always seen teaching and research as co-constitutive, as commensurate with being a member of an academic field. and I value them both equally, and that is not always reflected in academia. But it was in terms of my trajectory, career trajectory, I wanted to represent myself well in both areas, in teaching and in research, and have both of those pursuits inform each other. So yeah.
So I think for me, I'll tease out some of the differences. With the C4 awards, I think those have been instrumental in helping C4 go from an interesting idea that we tried and piloted into something where we've been able to get it on a much more stable basis. So getting validation of the idea for the whole teaching team and for the whole space that the students have created allowed us to continue to develop and grow it. And Danielle has gone on and been very successful with a number of other grant applications for supporting funding for C4. So having that GEDC award really helped us get fairly sizable funding from other groups. In terms of the Reimagine Education shortlist, I think being able to be recognized to be playing in innovative spaces and finding those kindred spirits is really helpful when we're looking at trying out new things. So finding the people who are playing in those new spaces worldwide, getting shortlisted for something like that really allows you to find those other people and build that network of people who are excited about trying out things and learning and developing and growing. In terms of the sort of personal award, I think it really talks to what both Eric and Bridget have said around being open to looking to support other colleagues. It's nice when it sort of turns back on you, but the thought of actually thinking where are the people in our organization that we would love to shine a light on. Actually getting an award helped me recognize there are so many other people I would think would be far more worthy of these awards. And, you know, I have my part to play. And so, you know, that giving and getting, I think, is a really interesting part of the process.
Thank you all so much. I'm wondering if you could all reflect on whether your teaching practice has changed as a result of receiving an award. And if so, how? Or did it just reaffirm what you were already doing? And if we could start with Bridget and then Friends and Eric, that'd be a great order this time.
Okay. Thank you, Matthew. I do think that the awards were motivational, as I mentioned earlier. I think that I started taking more risks and started really thinking about, as a result of receiving the university wide award, thinking a little bit more, thinking outside the box. I think I also want to mention that I teach in the dance program, but I don't actually teach in the studio. I teach dance studies. So that would be something to just, so once I received the award, I tried new things and I had more confidence in attempting applying new pedagogical principles or mixing things together to see what would happen, and felt that there was greater confidence. I will be just 1 second. Sorry, everybody.
All great. Thanks, Bridget. So yeah, I think I hope Danielle won't mind me putting words in her mouth when I say that. I think for us, when we started to create the cross-campus capstone, we weren't sure what we were trying to create. We weren't sure what it was going to look like. Our students were wonderfully supportive and seemed to appreciate the space we were creating. But as many of us, I'm sure, experienced, there was a certain amount of imposter syndrome. Were we doing something that was useful or valuable? And getting that recognition from external organizations, the deans, Airbus, the industry, helped us recognize that this wasn't something that we thought was cool, that our students seemed to be thinking was cool, but it seemed to have a greater value. So that has allowed us, I think, to just like Bridget was saying, feel we were on a good path and a right path to continue down. And so being open to having external groups evaluate some innovations that you want to try can be really interesting and informative. And I think has changed, it's allowed me to be a little bit more confident, just a little bit more confident when it comes to, yes, it's worth trying these fun new things.
I only received my award in August, and I also became chair of the department in July. And so I'm now down to teaching one course a year. So I'm barely teaching. And the course I am teaching is the one that I could probably teach with both hands tied behind my back. I am making a change. I'm going to teach on overload next year so that I can teach more, because I really want to be teaching. But there is, even just in teaching one course, there's sort of a sense like I'm seen, that people see me as a teacher. I've always experimented, always mucked around with my course, always doing new things, always playing. That's partly just the nature of how I was taught to teach. And that's one of the great, great lucks of my life, is to have had great mentors who specifically taught me how to teach. So I do stand on the shoulders of giants, but I was also indoctrinated very strongly in the idea of like, make my own way. And so I continue to make my own way and question why we do how we do. And I think for many people in studio practices, it's very easy to get caught up hearing the voice in the back of your head, the tape that plays in your head as you go to teach of your former teachers. And so to say, no, I'm finding my own way here, is an important thing for many studio instructors. That has been, I think, for me, a defining feature. And the award just reinforces that voice in my head that questions, that a new way must be tried. Yeah, there we go. Get the logo in there. Motto, it's a motto.
Thank you. It's nice hearing the awards being sort of, like you said, Eric, reinforcing, giving you all that sort of confidence and approval to innovate and try new things and know you're doing something well at some point to somebody. The fact that you got these awards, it's nice to hear that you can bring that into your practice in one way or another. The next question I have, I want us to switch for the next couple of questions to think about actually applying for these awards, because I think just the application is one of the biggest barriers. And if it was up to me, I would be walking into every classroom, I think, and giving an award for something, because there's so many wonderful things happening. But how do we get people to get to the application stage? So having gone through the process of applying for these teaching awards, what did you learn about the process itself? We'll start with you, Eric, and then Franz and Bridget.
I think, having been a nominator before being nominated meant that I really did understand the process very clearly. And the nominator is a really important person in terms of at least most awards. And so having a good advocate who will write on your behalf, who really sees you, and often, we're often kind of siloed in our teaching, that many of our colleagues don't actually see our teaching. And so finding a colleague who you have a connection with, who somehow you do team things with, or that you're part of an area where there is a connection. So that is a really important part. And I happen to be in an area where there's a lot of overlap between various courses, and we do some teaching together. Not a lot, but enough that people have a sense of one another. And so that, it's a kind of service to be a nominator for somebody, but it's also, it's easier to do that when you really have a sense of who that person is as a teacher. And so making those connections, very easy to be isolated, to break those barriers and get past my social anxiety to make that ask is a big thing. And so, I do suggest the idea of partnering an award with some other kind of review process. If you're going for tenure, for example, there's a process of generating content essentially that could be part of a nomination. But you don't have to do it that way. There are other ways to get it done. But carving out the time, that's so often the issue for us. It was like, oh, this is going to take a lot of time. Carving out the time, it really does pay back. It's a worthy investment. And also make sure that you're clear on whether you can have your application for an award rolled over for the next round. Because one of the things I learned very quickly is that often a nominated person will end up going up against a so-called superstar, that someone is retiring and they're going to be nominated for a teaching award on their way out the door. And just when it's not really going to do them any good. And the letters that people are going to write for that person as they retire are stellar. You just can't compete with someone like that. And sometimes I feel like the award should be changed so that there's a different kind of like a bye-bye award rather than competing with people who are still in the trenches. But the other thing to remember is that there's so many aspects to teaching that we think of the sort of interaction in the classroom, but there's all that work that you might invest your time and attention around doing workshops and webinars and presenting papers at conferences. And because of my field is very much about pedagogy, I'm wrapped up in that all the time. But a lot of people can very easily add a bit more to their dossier around teaching by doing some of the things that the Teaching Commons is supporting. So if this is important to you, engage with Teaching Commons so that you're not just going at it from the meet in the room with the students. Those are my points.
Great. Yeah, I think I'm going to focus on a couple of different things. First thing is the variety of awards that are out there. So I've talked about the fact that, for C4, Danielle and I worked on an award for a project. And in a way, that's possibly something that's a little bit more comfortable for a lot of us, where it's not focused on us, it's focused on the space that our students are occupying, and we can get excited about what they're achieving in this space. And the fact that it's a celebration of their work. And so that can be something that, a lot of us can get behind, because it feels less about, well, what did we do? It's about the space that we've been able to create and support. So there are also awards like engineering education. There'll be education in X discipline type awards which exist, which can be really helpful to be recognized within a specific field of learning as well. And then that led us to apply for we were nominated for a couple, some of these, but we applied for the Reimagine Education Awards as a space to be for the world to be aware of this thing that we'd created. So thinking of an award as a space to grow awareness can also be something that's useful. The other thing I learned was, when you if somebody wants to nominate you for award, I'd naively assumed initially, oh, this sounds very grateful, very nice. Oh, there's work to do. And so it's worth being aware that there is actually some work to do to prepare a dossier, but it's actually really interesting work, because it allows you to take that step back and reflect on, so what is this space that people are wanting to nominate? And what is the thing that is seen as valuable, because often we don't take that time to actually take that step back and reflect on those things. And so having the opportunity to use an award application as a chance to just reflect on what were we trying to create, how have we created it, what is valued in it, what is the value of it, is really something that, you know, I've really appreciated. I know. So.
Picking up on a few things that Franz just said, that reflective aspect to the application process is really generative. It's very challenging. But once you've written a teaching philosophy, even if a few years later you go back to it and you think, oh no, I see things differently now, you have a basis, a template from which to grow and to also to reflect on how your teaching has evolved, and then to the actual document to be able to revise it and you know, see the way that your teaching practice has changed and the way in the choices that you've been making. So the statement that I needed to make for the university-wide teaching award, that then became the base document for my conversion application, and then became the base document for my TNP package that went in, right? So I had this ability to reflect on, I guess, over a 4-year period, what I'd learned and what had shifted in my teaching and my thinking, and the ways that I was doing a little bit less of this and more of this, more of the risk taking, and more of problem solving, right? More sort of reflecting on and taking into consideration the feedback that I was receiving from students through their course evaluations, even during COVID, and thinking about, okay, there's something here that is really important, and how am I going to address that? And how has that been missed in the mix of my courses or my evaluation strategies or my or the kinds of assignments that I create? And so it yeah, it's been this ongoing until very recently, until November of 2022. It's been a working, living document, and that started with the application or the statement that I generated for the University Teaching Award.
Thank you, and thanks, Eric, for plugging the Teaching Commons. I promise we didn't plan that. I do like that all of you have touched upon the importance of finding the time to reflect, and like how that can transfer into different spaces too. I didn't hire myself, but I know that when I interviewed for my Teaching Commons role that I'm in now, came straight after when I won the D2L Innovation in Teaching and Learning Award. So I'd gone through that process of having to really narrow down what I'd done for the past year and a half on a project and reflecting on it, so that when it came to talking about it, I was ready. I'd spent so long thinking. So having the opportunity to, and yeah, the programming that I planned for these awards gives the space for reflection and coming into dialogue, meeting people that are doing the same things as you, so you can talk through and getting excited about things. For the next question, I'd love for you to suggest any strategies or suggestions or advice for those interested in teaching awards. If we start with Franz, and then move to Eric and then Bridget.
Yeah, so I think I want to maybe highlight 3 things. First thing is being aware of the ecosystem awards that are out there, because if you're wanting to think about how to support an activity you might be doing with students, or highlight those types of things, being aware of what awards are out there and what they're trying to encourage and support is a really useful first step. And they all have timelines, and recognizing what those timelines look like and being ahead of the game is a good thing. I think one of the things Eric's already talked about previously, when you're aware of that ecosystem, you can then think, who in my ecosystem would I want to be nominating for these? And going through the process of nominating others is a hugely valuable way of actually recognizing what that looks like and how to be prepared should somebody choose to nominate you. And then the third thing I would say is, slipped my mind. I'll come back to it.
So, apply early, apply often. The having significant lead time is important if you're going to have the time to reflect, and thinking about, oh, this is an award, it's due tomorrow. Well, maybe I'll apply next year isn't a bad thought to have. And then what you should do next is put in your calendar for 2 months before that award is due, a reminder to yourself so that you're not in that situation again. If you're going to be proactive about getting an award, plan it, and take it on like a project. Well, why don't you take your third point right away? Because
I
have to think of.
Really didn't mean to interrupt it.
I was hesitating. Go ahead.
Yeah, the third point is, I think doing that reflection that we've talked about is hugely valuable anyway. So having a chance to reflect on your teaching and learning spaces and the spaces that you're looking to create or have created is a valuable thing in and of itself. And out of that could come something that makes sense to be put forward as an award, whether it's for a space you've created or for yourself. So yeah, anyway, apologies, Eric.
No worries, no worries. One of the things I was going to say was, often you need letters of support from students. And if you're doing a project where current students are helpful, that's good, but also having kind of connections to your former students. And sometimes things like Facebook can be a helpful thing for maintaining relationships with former students. Wishing people happy birthday and keeping them in your mind, you in their mind. There is just a personal connection. I'm not the kind of person who sees them. There are, in my field, there are like voice gurus. I'm absolutely not that kind of person. My job is to make myself redundant. You don't need me anymore because I taught you everything I know. And so I don't maintain those kinds of relationships like some people in my field do. But creating a sense of community with the people who then go into various other fields is an important thing to remember and stay in touch with those people. That community of former learners are important. Yeah, I think that I'll leave it there for now.
So my collegial reciprocity, so that when a colleague nominates you or is asked and agrees to write a letter of reference or letter of support, that it then creates a mutual, not a mutual admiration society, but a situation, but at least this collegiality that we're all working really hard. And exactly as, forgive me, I think it was Eric said, we're not aware of what each other is doing. We're so busy doing our teaching and our projects and our research. And so to take a step back to think about the contributions that a colleague is making, and how they're making a difference in the lives of their students, and how they're creating opportunities for lifelong learning and self-awareness. And so then to be able to contribute to that, or have someone contribute to your own file and then turn around and do it, it creates a convivial, collegial environment. And so I've had to get over the hesitance to ask somebody to support me, And I'm always thrilled when they say, I'll do it if you'll support me when I need something. And it's like, yes, absolutely. I would love to do that, because in the ask, there's something about that person that clearly you feel will complement your file, who has a perspective or a purview that will be meaningful and generative to your file. So to be able to return the favor is a really special relationship to create between peers.
Thank you very much. That's twice asking has come up in this panel, and I think we sometimes forget that we can't just sit waiting for a nominator to find us. And yeah, we sometimes have to, you know, build those relationships so we can ask. And I do like, Bridget, that idea of being welcome to give it back in whatever shape or form that comes, and creating this nice ecosystem of everybody getting awards. It would be wonderful. So as a final question before we move into a Q&A, if there's any questions from everybody that's here, I'd like to give you a moment to ask you, what message about teaching and learning would you like to share? And we'll start with you, Bridget, and then we'll move to you, Eric, and then end with you, Franz.
Trust your gut. I think that's what I have understood over the past few years, that if something is going well or if something is not going well, to not ignore it, to celebrate the things that are going well, but the things that are not working. And you can see it. You can see it when you're in a classroom and you're presenting an idea or you know, making connections, and even in virtual spaces, to see that it just didn't settle, or it didn't take. And you might not be able to fix it in the moment, but to go away and think about, yeah, that's, and it isn't like, it doesn't have to be a constant refrain, right? You don't have to be obsessive about it. That's not what I'm suggesting. But when something is going well, or when something is not going well, to trust that feeling and make change, right? Just come back to your students and say, you remember last week or last Tuesday or on Monday, I said this, or I was thinking we would take it in this direction and it went off in a very different direction. So let's revisit that. And so you have these kind of projections of what's going to happen in a classroom, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And it's really okay to reflect on it and then try to reinsert yourself into that moment and figure out. So trust your gut about things.
I have a great segue, that trust your gut in terms of teaching the student in front of you. I have the great luxury of teaching small class sizes, and I know what privilege that is in today's economic environment, but academic environment. But there's a certain possibility for empathy and to see and hear the student before you, and not kind of glaze over and see them as a great mass, even when you've got a very large class, to really speak to individuals. I really believe in the idea of the teachable moment, that moment that presents itself where it forces you to really be present with the student, to really hear what they need and to change. And the other thing about teaching and awards is often about innovation, about change. And if there was ever a time where we needed change, it's now. And change happens with one small step. And if you feel anxiety, make it a small step, a little itty bitty step. It doesn't have to be the transformation of every single course or the whole syllabus, or just one little thing. Every class is an opportunity for one little thing. Everything's open, everything can be questioned. And that questioning is what leads to excellence. And if you're passionate about excellence, you should be questioning it all. So that's my thought.
So I think I've got 3 points again. First one is, I think it's not just my students who are learning in this space. That there are probably not that many of us who have had a very formal education in how to support learning. And so I find myself learning every day from my students, from my colleagues, from this space. And that helps me also recognize what the learners I'm trying to support are going through, because I'm in that space as well. I think recognizing that learning can be hard, and so we have to work out how to have fun in doing it, how to enjoy it, how to find those light moments, and things like celebrating the successes is really important. And then I think the other thing is we often find ourselves feeling isolated in a classroom, but recognizing we're a team. And to bring it back to you, Matthew, the value of the Teaching Commons. Danielle and I found ourselves in the Teaching Commons. That's where we met. Teaching Commons has always been my cottage to, the place I can go for the feeling of support and the network. And recognizing that that is out there, I think, is really important.
Thank you all so much, and thank you for taking the time to answer my questions.